How about this for a little bonus? Here's the whole subframe at the back of the Suburban.
Installing the transmission, but especially when it is tied to my transfer case, is among my least favorite things to do. It's just a lot of odd weight to push a few feet in the air, and I guess I just feel like the whole thing is trying to fall off the jack and kill me. But there is a valuable tool that at least I think makes this as safe and as simple as possible.
Hey y'all, we're up here at the OP today doing all the prep, or really starting all the prep on the Suburban for the next leg of the Powerstop backcountry discovery route that we're gonna do. It's meant for motorcycles, but we're gonna take our trucks. And I guess just a little point of order before we get started. First, I know I'm covered in dirt, and I know I'm bleeding. And today's a little bit of a casual episode for some of those reasons, because we just had to get straight to work. But it means it's also time for something cold to drink. And I'm gonna tell you all about the prep that we're doing and some very, very important tools that make that prep not just easy, but I think a lot safer to get done. Okay, just as a reminder, the Powerstop BDR, the backcountry discovery route, that's a set of routes that a bunch of motorbikes use to go across a few states. Powerstop and a couple of us that work with them, they send us on these about 10-ish day trips to go through and do some of those same routes, but we take our trucks. And we do that because we go early, we clear trails. Not the tree I ordered. And quite frankly, it's hard to pack a chainsaw and enough fuel in anything other than, or at least in my opinion, something with a lot of sheet metal, ground clearance, and big tires. Now, last year, remember, we went and did Washington, 600-ish miles from the Canadian border all the way down to Bridge of the Gods, right just east of Portland, Oregon. This year, we are running the BDR in Oregon. And picking up pretty much right where we left off. This is all prep for that episode. This is also the part where you can make all of your Oregon Trail jokes related to what we were doing on the powertrain. We pulled the 4L80, and guys, I'll be honest, before getting the 4L80 in here, I went through a bunch of 700 R4s, and so I always have it in my mind that I need to stay very attuned to how the transmission's behaving and what kind of load has been on it this whole time. And I called Greg at Phoenix Transmissions. He built this one, and I kind of told him, hey, look, I'd like to do a preventive check over the winter and just have you take a look and give it a clean bill of health before we go back out and start hitting the spring and the summer off-road season. And he thought that was a really good idea.
Greg at Phoenix Transmission is a good friend to the shop, and he staffed his business with experienced mechanics and some folks who are real hot rodders who did an inspection of the 4L80, found nothing of concern, and got it all loaded up and headed back to me. Whenever I take something apart and it's going to sit for a minute, man, I bag and label nearly everything. And I don't know about y'all, but my head gets so deep into all these different projects that I need every little trick to keep up with all the details like these. Since the Magnum has lots of different mounting positions via its clocking ring, I have a mark on mine for where it aligns with the top bolt. And I don't know, but for whatever reason, the chassis mount for all this has taken a heck of a beating from the elements, so I'm giving Seymour's 316 stainless paint a try. It actually has stainless steel powder in it. It's supposed to be very corrosion resistant, and
Did you call it a Cherokee?
well, it doesn't really matter much in this instance, but it's actually weldable.
So when you put the torque converter on, there's 3 steps that you go through. The first just being the first on, then you kind of get the splines engaged a little bit, but the last piece where the torque converter gets real tight to the back of the housing is when you've engaged the pump. That's how you know it's all the way on. It's pushed pretty deep in. A lot of people put these on thinking they've got them fully installed, but still some way to go. Take your time.
Cool, now we're ready to casually foist a 400-pound gorilla back into the truck. No big deal. Now, who's up for a good bench press? No thanks.
I don't know how much my 4L80 weighs. I gotta bet it's at least 200 pounds, especially with the torque converter on it. Add a Magnum behind that, and I know how much that weighs. And now you gotta hoist that whole mess 2 feet, at least 2 feet for a truck like this. And it's just teetering up there.
I don't care who you are, that is a lot of oddly balanced weight to have to manage.
About another, looks like 4 inches or so. That is why I bought an absolutely real deal transmission jack. Not an adapter, not anything like that, a real transmission jack. First of all, this is a Harbor Freight transmission jack, and whoever they have make it for them over in Asia, right? Let's be candid about where it comes from. man, they got it right. This is a very fantastic piece of gear. There's some things you're kind of taking a gamble with Harbor Freight, but not this. This is a legit piece of gear. And I got a little while ago, I think if you use all the coupons that you can get for Harbor Freight, it's like $360 or whatever, you'll be able to move up and down a lot of weight at a very high level, I think pretty safely.
What you're trying to do is you're trying to get some dowels, very hard to see, but there's a dowel right there, big fat dowels that made up on the transmission bell housing. That keeps you from having to put in a bunch of hardware to make this thing work. Anyway, there's a dowel on both sides, and so Chris is scoping his while I'm scoping this one. And because the engine is pointed back and down, we're just trying to make sure that this whole assembly, is all jiggery-pokery together correctly. So it's a whole lot to put in at one time.
Call me simple, but I just really appreciate a piece of gear that works well and makes difficult tasks easier and safer.
This just came off the LS, this hardware.
And this is only tip number one, right? Get a good piece of gear. Don't waste your time with transmission jack adapters on the end of your floor jack, especially if you're lifting stuff into a big truck. And then secondly, and for all good common sense, there's no reason to, beast this in there by hand. That's just dangerous, right? You'll never find me recommending you do very much by hand. We have tools, right? We're Homo sapiens sapiens. We're known for using our tools. And that is how we have gotten to the moon and back, and you should be able to put a transmission in your truck using tools. With that lecture aside, really, the second thing is do this with a buddy.
Before you do that, let me undo this.
Are you going to get the strap?
Yeah.
Get the strap.
All I got to do is undo it so it's not tensioning the wrong way. There we go.
I can't thank Chris enough for just, taking a minute away from what his projects are to be the second set of eyes to be like, no, this is not going to fall apart and crush you or me. And this is the kind of stuff where you need a friend to come over and really just lend you a hand. It's the safe way to do this type of work. So the transmission is in and safe. That's enough for today. Tomorrow I'm going to come in, I'm going to do all the plugins and just to make sure that the transmission's good and connected, throw fluid in it, and then we're going to be, kind of rolling through the gears, filling all those galleries. These things are still good. They've got a lot of life on them. I've loved this tire ever since I first started running it on the Trail to SEMA in 2018, another Powerstop trip. And let me show you, these Maxxis Razrs, they are tougher than nails. I like the tread pattern. They work really well with my truck. And where you run into anybody else, it's tearing up different types of tires. And I've run a number of ones before this. That is never an affliction I've had with these. But these things work well, and exactly why Maxxis sent another set, because we continue to use, abuse, and test these things out, and they just keep performing. And until that changes, I'm gonna keep running them.
I guess the underlying theme of today's video is finding gear that works well and making full use of it. Back to the transmission. One of the things that I really like is being able to hang on to fittings from past projects, and it gives the illusion of being organized. I goobered up the threads on this guy, and this is for the drain on the Magnum. But it's good to have just a spare. And look, I spent way too much to put all these things in here, but at one time or another they were used or excess, or I thought I needed them, and I'm just glad not to have to run to Summit today. Getting everything else back together is pretty straightforward. The flex plate hardware gets blued Loctite and is torqued. Everything else gets anti-seize, and really before you know it, it's time to put in about 8 quarts of ATF. Fire this thing and get the pump turning.
Hold the flex plate and torque.
And then finally, I'd say my last little tip here is, one, you guys have heard me say before, right? Don't make it a time an enemy. Make it a tool that you use, that you're willing to spend as long as it takes to safely put something in place, throw bolts in, and then take a break once you've got it where you want. By no means did we have one of these until after the work was done. Because when the work's done, I'm running on pure adrenaline. But afterward, take a minute and just kind of chill out. It's my opinion that this big assembly, 2 feet in the air, is trying to kill me. And I just have a great load of respect for that. If you guys have made it this far into the video and you've seen me kind of go on about this, then good on you, because I just don't take this stuff very lightly.
So that's glow plugs for All right, I'm looking at the camera timer. We just hadn't wired in the new Switch Pro, so I had to manually trigger the relay for the glow plugs.
This wire's obviously not going to get hot. Clear.
This is just the first step of my BDR prep, and we've got a lot more to cover next week.
Look, before we wrap up, if you want to know more about this truck, there's a whole story about it, and I've got the episode linked right here. My dad bought this new, and I grew up in the truck, but I explain all of that in the video. So go check that out if you wanted a historical perspective before all the links and all that sort of stuff. Kind of when I had my truck just built with leaf springs. It was really fun. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.